As they've been doing for many, many years, the Chicago Blackhawks take the ice at the United Center as the horn sounds and the fans cheer. There was once a time when the fans were louder and more enthusiastic as the teams that took the ice were Stanley Cup caliber teams with Jonathan Toews and Patrick Kane leading the way. Those days are long over, and they're now in the early stages of a very massive rebuild. Blackhawks general manager Kyle Davidson, who took over in October of 2021, has worked to tear everything from the old era down to try to build something new. The glory days of the Blackhawks have been long over, and for a while they were just treading water in cap hell and no real direction. Kyle Davidson had to make the ultimate sacrifice by moving on what was left of that old era and starting completely from scratch. Everything changed for the Chicago Blackhawks when it was announced that they had won the lottery, which would allow them to draft Connor Bedard, the phenom from the Regina Pats, who was catching the eyes of millions of hockey fans around the world and had Hall of Fame projection numbers before he even became an NHL player. Even the GOAT, Wayne Gretzky, was amazed by what Connor Bedard can do. And since drafting Connor Bedard, fans have been buying shirts and jerseys with his name on it and coming out to the United Center to watch him play. And since drafting Connor Bedard, the Blackhawks have actually doubled in partial and full season tickets sold. The fact that one kid makes this big of a difference really is telling. So far in his young NHL career, Connor Bedard is living up to the hype. He's already scored highlight reel goals that have made ESPN Top 10 and all the other sports networks, and is getting on the score sheet on a nightly basis. But the cold, hard reality remains that this team is still in the very early stages of a rebuild and has a very long way to go before being a legit cup contender. Connor Bedard is the rock in which they are building on, but they have to build all around him. And luckily, the Blackhawks do have some assets, though there have been some bumps in the road so far in which they've been building this. The 2023-2024 team was always going to be a rebuilding non-contender, though there was hope that they would be a bit scrappier and not as much of a pushover as they have been. However, Taylor Hall suffered an early injury and had to miss the rest of the year, and Corey Perry was released early in the year due to off-ice misconduct. Not to mention forward Andres Athanasiou, who scored 20 goals for the Blackhawks last year, also got hurt early in the season and hasn't played since. But really the biggest disappointment of the Blackhawks so far this year has been the lack of production from Lukas Reichel. Before Connor Bedard showed up, Lukas Reichel was probably the number one talked about prospect in the Blackhawks organization for the past few years. While he's only still 21 years old, expectations for him were much higher going into this season, and in 50 games put up only 3 goals and 7 assists. He was recently just sent down to Rockford to try to get him right. Again, he's only 21 years old, and I don't think we should give up on him just yet, but there's no doubt that it's been very disappointing for him so far. In addition to him trying to get back on track, the hope is that they continue to develop the likes of Frank Nazar and Oliver Moore, who they also drafted this past first round. The Blackhawks, looking forward to next drafts, going back to that topic, also hold 2 first-rounders in the 2024 draft, as well as 2 second-rounders, 2 third-rounders, a 4th-rounder, 2 5th-rounders, a 6th-rounder, and a 7th-rounder. So these last few years of Kyle Davidson trading assets away have resulted in him collecting all of these draft picks. Not only will these be valuable in the draft themselves, but it also gives you some ammunition if you decide to make a big trade. The fact of the matter is, eventually Kyle Davidson is going to have to spend a bulk of that cap space he created and use some of those draft picks to acquire legitimate players. While we know Rome was not built in a day and that this team is not going to go from 0 to hero next year, we need to see some legitimate improvement on the ice in terms of wins and losses. Next year, they should not be in the basement by mid-February. They should at least be semi-competitive and respectable to the point where you can see legit growth. Right now, we're going to accept the fact that they are bottom tier, but this has to be it. Next year, things have to be on the rise. And sure, we can look at this season and give credit to a few players. Peter Mrazek in goal has been very, very solid. We've also seen the likes of Jason Dickinson have a nice season, and give some credit to Nick Foligno, who has served as a very, very good leader on this team and a mentor to Connor Bedard. We also can't fail to mention Kevin Korchinski, the prospect defenseman who Kyle Davidson took a few years ago. Korchinski has shown some flashes, but clearly still needs some work. This is part of the growing process as he is still very, very young. Overall, I do believe that the vision is good and that there is some hope. Head coach Luke Richardson seems to have built a good culture there. It's just hard to win when you lack talent like the Blackhawks do. There's a lot of guys out there trying their best and doing what they can, but eventually you're just going to need more star players like you had for many, many years. You need your next rounds of Duncan Keiths, Brent Seabrooks, Patrick Sharps to go along with your Patrick Kanes and Jonathan Tazes. Those great teams were talented and deep, and the evaluation of Kyle Davidson is crucial going forward, as you need to do more than just get star players, but those depth guys as well. Even the likes of Brandon Saad and Johnny Oduya and Nicholas Hjalmarsson all those years. Hopefully, too, the day will come where they find their Marian Hossa in free agency as well. But that's probably not going to come for some time. But make no mistake, this Blackhawks team should hopefully be a legitimate playoff contender in a few years. We would really, really hate to see Connor Bedard's talents get wasted here for 5+ seasons. You can rebuild with him for his first few years, as they did with Patrick Kane and Jonathan Toews, but when he starts to hit that prime, that's when you need to start getting serious about winning. So until that day comes when the Blackhawks are back in the playoffs and people are waving rally towels at the Madhouse on Madison, chin up, hang in there, and let's go Hawks. Thanks for listening.